Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 6. This week, I am promising you and promising myself that the lecture is going to be very short. There's only 9 slides in this lecture, so I'm attempting to keep it short. The reason is that I'm asking you to read 2 things this week: the chapter 5 of the text, and also this article by Singh. And so they're both talking about job analysis. So what we're going to do this week for the discussion is really an exercise. So let me get right into that. So this comes from the text at the end of chapter 5, and I've modified it just a little bit in the questions, as you can see at the bottom. But this exercise comes right out of the text. So basically what this talks about is I'm asking you to come up with a job analysis for a position called a social media director. So you can see right there in the questions, the setup is that your nonprofit has decided to create a new position called the social media director, which the intro paragraph talks about the reason your organization might want a social media director to begin with. So what I'm going to ask you to do is answer 2 questions. One is identify the method or methods that you're going to use for the job analysis. More on that in a minute. And the second thing is identify competencies that are required for the position. And I give you some parameters there about how many competencies you should identify and then what you should write about each one. So what is this thing we call job analysis? Well, I would just like to kind of revert to my own experiences and be anecdotal, if I may. When I worked for the Air Force, one of the things that the civilian side of the Air Force did, and this is common throughout the federal government, is they would do something they would call desk audits. And what would happen is somebody from HR would show up at an office and they would basically sit there and watch a person do their job and take a lot of notes. And so, of course, the chapter talks about how sometimes when a job analysis is being done, it irritates the person in the job. And yes, I can attest to that, because what this desk audit would do would, calculate the number of minutes that the incumbent in the job would take to do certain tasks. And it all seemed very intrusive, right? So, but the point is that a job analysis is supposed to be a systematic process of collecting data. So how are you going to collect data? That was one of the ways to collect data. But there's a purpose in collecting the data, and it's actually to determine these KSOCs, these knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics required to successfully perform a job, and to make judgments about the nature of the job. So sometimes the only way you get that information is from the incumbent. So what does this job analysis include? So you're looking at the activities, behaviors, tasks, and performance standards. You're looking at the whole big kind of environment or context in which the job is performed, and you're looking at personal requirements necessary to perform a job. So that might be things like, you have to be skilled at Microsoft Excel, or you have to be bilingual, for example, you have to be fluent in Spanish and English, or you may have to be able to occasionally lift up to 40 pounds. So those are the personal requirements necessary for the job. But then, theoretically, the job analysis actually looks at that position, not the person filling it, but the position, and tries to contextualize it in relationship to the whole organization. And so Pine starts to talk about this idea of strategic job analysis, which is kind of the notion that everything changes, right? And things are changing faster now. Strategic job analysis is looking forward to what kinds of positions, not that you have today, but what do you need 3 years from now, 5 years from now? More on that in a second. So here's the kind of the six traditional HR functions here, right? Recruitment and selection, developing compensation systems, HR planning, career development and training, performance evaluation, risk management, and job design. Okay, so if you have an HR function, and let's say it's all in-house, then you might have persons that do each of these things. So I'm kind of reverting back to the idea that HR is a function rather than a strategic partner. But indulge me for a second. The idea is that job analysis, so for a particular job or position in the organization, it should be linking to these things. So the reason you do a job analysis is so that you can have a successful recruitment and selection process, right? So how do you know the people that you ask to do the recruiting and the hiring, how can they be successful at that job unless they're very sure of what the job entails? Moving forward, how do you develop the kind of compensation that you should offer in that job unless you do an analysis of the job and you understand the expertise that's involved and you also understand how it fits in with the rest of the organization? Moving on, how do you develop that? How do you plan to develop whoever's in that job? It doesn't really, I'm not talking about the person you hire, but whoever is in that job. How do you plan to conduct training and career development for that job? For example, you might actually expect that the person filling this job comes with certain training that they've already conducted, right? You might not expect to train them on certain aspects of the job. So that speaks to knowledge and skills that they might already have. The performance evaluation system, the linkage there is, again, if you have a performance evaluation system that translates to the strategic goals of the organization, you have to understand and be able to define that linkage. And so risk management, that's things like job hazards. And then job design identifies the changes in tasks over time. So again, the point here now, let's move forward to thinking of HR as strategic human resources management. The point is that all these functions are supposed to work together. That's really the normative expectation, that we don't have, an HR department with 6 cubicles that nobody talks to each other, and in those 6 cubicles are each of these 6 specialists that do these things, and there's no strategic linkage. So the point is that the job analysis function actually links jobs in the organization, the larger organization, to HR. So this is the part I was kind of talking about, telling my little story about desk audits. When you do a job analysis, you have to collect data. It is a data collection effort in a sense. So look at this list of information that's commonly collected, right? So job activities. Hey, how do you spend your day? What do you do? Education requirements. Do you have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a high school diploma? Are those things necessary to do this job? Tell me about the kinds of equipment you use. Do you do spreadsheets? Do you do databases? Do you use a shovel? Do you drive a vehicle? So all those kinds of equipment, right? So working conditions. Is it an office environment, a warehouse environment, an outside construction environment, an industrial environment? Who do you supervise? What kinds of communication skills do you have? So for example, a customer facing position, what kind of communication skills should that person have? And then you're talking about contacts and networks, both internally and externally. And then finally, you're getting down to the KSOCs again. So all this information that somebody's doing a job analysis about they're actually gathering often from the incumbent. So getting back to the exercise for the week, these are listed. These are the job analysis techniques at a minimum that Pines lists, right? So I'm not going to go into detail about these because she talks about each one of these and some of the things that these 6 things entail as job analysis techniques. And what she also talks about is when particular techniques might be appropriate compared to other techniques depending on the kind of job that you're talking about. So finally, what Pines talks about strategic job analysis. So here's what she's talking about. She's saying that the traditional job analysis focuses on these KSAOCs, the knowledge, skills, attributes, and other characteristics required for performance of a position just like it currently exists or has existed in the past. So yeah, my time in the federal bureaucracy, I saw a lot of this with the desk audits, right? So we're hiring, a clerk 4 or whatever, and this is what a clerk 4 does, and that's never going to change. But things do change. We're trying to prepare for future challenges. So what are you going to be looking at? And she starts talking about this. Should we be looking at positions that are more flexible? Should we be looking at managerial responsibilities that have been transferred to employees? So what's that about? What that's about is this idea that technology and just the way we think about work has enabled us really to try to flatten organizations, to do away with certain levels of supervision. So therefore, some of the things managers used to do, we have moved to employees. We're looking more and more at teamwork aspects, right? So instead of the stovepipe kind of silo job positions, we're looking at positions that could be matrixed within the organization and possibly in collaboration with even other organizations. So are those things important in your kind of strategic job analysis? And so all this boils down to the idea that we're coming up with a future-oriented approach. And so how does she say that should be done? She talks about convening subject matter experts to actually discuss this and come up with the competencies that these kinds of positions could require. And so at this point, this is where the Singh article actually comes in handy. The reason I include the Singh article is because Singh has an approach in the article for kind of a strategic job analysis. But in addition, Singh is a kind of a critic of the job analysis process anyway. And so that's important for you to read as you think through this idea of strategic job analysis. So this is just kind of a fun little thing that I'd like you to do. I'm not going to open these links because you can do it. I picked out 2 positions, really recent positions off the UNO job postings that's on the UNO website. So 2 positions I picked out. The first one I picked out is at the University of Nebraska Central Admin in Lincoln. And it's for a Windows System Administrator. So you can click on that link. The second one is a faculty position at UNO, and it's for an instructor of musical theater. So what I'd like you to do, this is kind of a thought exercise, is click on each of those links and pick out the knowledge, skills, attributes, and other characteristics of each position, and then kind of compare them and see how they differ. See the level of specificity that each requires, and see which one seems to point towards hiring someone who might want to develop skills like creativity, working in a team. And so the point of this exercise is just to think through the idea that we really have to develop competencies that we want to develop strategically within the organization. So this might kind of help you see some differences in the way that's done. So boom, I'm back to this as a reminder that this is the exercise for this week. Posted on the discussion board, just like that, and then I've asked you to go ahead and provide comments back to each other, just like you would for a normal discussion. And you guys have actually, by the way, have been doing really great on the discussions. I'm really happy with the way the discussions are going. So for this week, that's what we're doing, is a little bit of a mini job analysis. Thanks a lot, and I look forward to your discussion.